I was addicted, the same cycle, every numb weekend, every bottle. That violence was always aimed at myself. Hi, I'm Steve Saporn, and this is the Neuro's Journey. I created this show for the man who's ready to see his actions align with who he really is. Join me each week for conversations, practical tools, and real stories to help you take ownership of your mind, your habits, and your life. I want you to think about a question with me. What if the anger that comes out of nowhere, the emotional shutdown when your kids really need you, the parts of you that feel like, I really want to change this, I've made some progress, but this is just me and I'm stuck with it. What if all that thinking is essentially wrong? What if instead of being stuck with it, you had a brain injury and you could heal that injury in the same way you'd heal a torn ACL or a broken wrist with the right intervention and the right plan? When I saw my brain scans, my life changed. And I really highly recommend everybody gets it done at least once. What I saw was that this was a system that had rules, and if I understood the rules of the game, I could change it. My brain adapted to things that happened to me, and I could adapt it to how I want to be now. I believed for most of my life that the hardest parts of me were just me, permanent, like factory settings. I had behaviors I really couldn't control, and I had determined that this was simply how I came out. I'd be in something with my wife, and I'd think, I really want to show up differently here. I want to agree to this. But in the heat of it, I just couldn't. And we both feel it. Me, because I didn't have control, and her because of that look of disappointment. Not because I wasn't trying, but just because she didn't really think I had it in me. And with my kids, it was never abuse, but it was kind of being a dick for no reason. Blowing up at them just for being kids. And it lands on them in ways that shape their development forever. And I knew that, and I still couldn't stop it. I was addicted, the same cycle, every numb weekend, every bottle. That violence was always aimed at myself. And from the outside, my life looked good. It was the Instagram life before there was even Instagram. I lived in amazing places, New York, Tahoe, Maui, Boulder. Beautiful wife, kids. I had a successful career. And yet inside, there was this feeling that I was just not okay. A feeling of brokenness that nothing on the outside could ever really touch. And inside, there was this constant buzz. It was a physical sensation. So I kept moving, performing, trying to control things, and consuming anything that would take the edge off. Because my body did it automatically. I thought I came out of the factory like that. Framing this as an injury absolutely changed my life. And the reason is simple. When I believed that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, I was stuck. Because if the problem's innate, what are you supposed to do about it? You keep a lid on it, and I ran that cycle for decades. The cycle breaks when you change the question. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking, what happened to me? How did my amazing brain and nervous system adapt to survive those things? Most guys shit on themselves for this process. They take their symptoms, the short fuse, the emotional distance, the drinking, workaholism, and they turn those symptoms into verdicts. I'm weak. I'm broken. What's wrong with me? And it's the verdict that keeps you stuck. You're born with this beautiful, perfectly functioning brain. And over time, life starts to shape it. You're told in ways big and small that how you are just isn't right. Maybe it was a father who wasn't emotionally available. Maybe in your house, performance was the only thing that got you noticed. Maybe it was something worse. I had a childhood filled with capital T trauma, sexual abuse, gun violence, things that really change a nervous system. But the reality is that every human being has had some version of this. Your brain adapted to the environment you grew up in. It took whatever was happening around you and built itself to survive it. Dr. Bruce Perry is a neuroscientist and child trauma researcher. He calls this use-dependent development. The brain develops in response to what it's being used for. So a child who needs to scan for danger constantly develops a brain exceptional at scanning for danger. And a child who experiences enough safety develops a brain exceptional at connection and calm. So the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that makes rational decisions and creates meaning out of what happens to you. And it wasn't even online when the difficult things were happening. You didn't have the brain function available to make sense of what was going on. And the threat sensing part of your brain, the older areas, they get overdeveloped and they start running the show. The brain doesn't distinguish between dramatic and quiet threat. A father who is emotionally absent creates the same kind of neural adaptations as a household with violence. The physiology is basically the same. I spent the better part of a decade trying to figure myself out. I didn't even know what trauma was at the beginning, let alone that what I was dealing with. I was fortunate enough to have some resources, and I did everything I could somatic therapy, psychedelic therapy, talk therapy. I even flew to the Naval Academy and had a former Navy SEAL inject my neck with anesthesia to drain the trauma out of me. And not one person, not one, ever said, why don't we look at the function of your brain? Let's just see if it's working the way it should. And then one day I was scrolling on Instagram and I saw Dr. Daniel Amen say that psychiatry is the only medical specialty that never looks at the organ in which it's treating. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is insane. All these years, doctors, therapists, treatments, and nobody once suggested I look at the function of my own brain. And then I reflected on the therapy that I've had and realized it's the only medical thing that I've ever done where we didn't actually measure where I was getting any better, actually measure what was happening about it. You know, think about that. Cardiologists run tests, orthopedics take imaging, but for the organ that runs it all, the standard approach is you sit in a room, you talk, or they prescribe you something, and you just hope it's working. I say that as someone who believes in therapy, but nobody ever really measured anything for me, and I was hitting a wall there. So I had a friend of mine who does neurofeedback, and I'd seen something where they put a cap on your head and scan your brain, and so I went in there. And they did that to me and compared it to a database of what a normal, healthy, functioning brain looks like. And what was really amazing is the clinician didn't know anything about me, nothing about my history. And when he looked at my scan, the behavior patterns that he was describing in my life were like he was living in my own house. The anxiety, the reactivity, the inability to sleep, hypervigilance, all of it from just looking at the scan. And he didn't say, yeah, that's just who you are. He said, this is a pattern we see in people who experience trauma and we can change it. And that moment changed everything I'd been thinking about myself for my entire life. Seeing my brain on a scan and understanding my experiences are what happened. My brain adapted to those experiences and I took those adaptations to be me in some permanent way. But it wasn't me. It was an injury, an adaptation, visible, measurable, and treatable. And here's how it worked. They scan your brain, they look at your brainwave patterns and compare them to the database. Then with neurofeedback, you're essentially doing exercises to train your brain to a healthier pattern. 10 sessions, scan again, adjust and repeat. The really cool thing is you can see the changes over time and relate them to the changes that are actually happening in your life. So you can see the whole system working. You can see your brain changing and your behavior changing at the same time. And it's a system. That's the key word. You have a system, your brain, your body, and the interactions between them. Your thoughts aren't just your brain firing in isolation. Your feelings are your body's way of communicating information upward. We've turned those somatic sensations into words like fear, anger, sadness. You can feel them in your gut, in your chest, or your throat. And your brain was developing all throughout your childhood. Patterns got set in. Things that felt like they're just you, they were actually adaptations. You never had a choice in making them, and they became you, or what you think is you. But here's the thing, the same system that was brilliant enough to adapt to keep you alive as a kid is adaptable enough to change now. You can shift your nervous system. You can shift things that felt like they could never be shifted. You can change parts of yourself that seemed like the most permanent, most basic parts of who you are. I know because I've done it. Say you're a skier and you catch an edge and blow out your ACL. Would you sit in the lodge and think, I guess I just wasn't born to ski? Or would you judge yourself for limping around? Would you tell yourself to just push through it? No, you'd say I have a torn ACL, I need a surgery, rehab, a recovery plan, whatever. That's how straightforward it is. And here's what changes when you actually do this and see it as a system. In your relationship, you come out of the shutdowns. You become emotionally available. Conflict stops being a threat and becomes a conversation. I remember when I was learning to meditate from Kornfield, and I was frustrated that my mind kept drifting off. And he said to me, the meditation isn't when you're perfectly calm and still. Meditation is the moment you notice that your mind has drifted away and you pull it back. That's the practice. That's meditation. And conflict in relationship is like that. Having a disagreement and resolving it peacefully, being able to hear what she has to say without it feeling like a threat, that changes everything. As a father, You stop reaching. As a father, you stop reacting and you start responding. Your kids will feel the shift. And one of the things I've learned is when your nervous system calms down, when you're not collapsing into numbness or running on anxiety and feel, you develop trust with them, real trust. Your system isn't telling you something that telling you something's wrong all the time. You develop trust, real trust. And you can look at your kids and stop being consumed by what college they get into or how they perform. It's their life. And instead of managing it, you become their ally. You're there, you're available, but you're not making their life about you. In business, the research is clear. A regulated nervous system impacts every person around you. And the people you lead can feel it. The ability to perform under stress, the work ethic, those were adaptations. They came from the same system. Your brain built those strengths to survive the same environment that gave you the difficult behavior. And the cool thing is you get to keep the strengths and change the patterns that are costing you. Same wiring, same intensity, just pointed in a direction you choose instead of one your childhood chose for you. Same wiring, same intensity, just pointed in a direction you choose instead of one your childhood chose for you. What this really does is give you a choice. I get to choose the kind of man I want to be. And even when I still have reactions, the changes I've made allow me to clean up my messes so much easier. It used to be so hard for me to say I was sorry. I always had an excuse or some reason why it was her fault. Now I can just say, oh, I didn't do well here. I have a kind of man that I want to be, and I wasn't acting like that. I'm sorry. And it changes things. A nervous system like mine, shaped by real trauma, can go in a lot of directions. And it can create someone violent, a predator. I wasn't that. I was just a dick sometimes and really self-destructive. I had heavy addictions, and the violence was aimed towards me. And the things that happened to me, they weren't fair, and that sucks, but they're also mine to deal with. But here's what you can't see while you're in it. It's not just a responsibility. Those things weren't just a responsibility I had, they were an opportunity. And the further you go down the path, the clearer it becomes. I've talked to hundreds of men, and it's the same thing. These wounds aren't what broke you, they're the door to the fullest expression of you, to really your soul's purpose. So before you go to sleep tonight, put your phone away, clear out the distractions, and just sit there with these 3 questions. How often do I react in ways I don't want to? Am I able to be genuinely present with the people who matter most, or am I always somewhere else? Is there an emotional ceiling I keep hitting? A gap between how I want to show up and how I actually do? If the answer to any of those is yes, I want you to hear this. Those patterns are not you. They are adaptations. Your system adapted brilliantly to get you through an early life that required it. And that same adaptability is available to you right now. You can change the inputs. You can work with your breath, your body, your personal psychology. You can understand what's triggering you and take responsibility for your own system. You're not broken, you adapted. And what adapted once can adapt again. Come on this journey with me, the hero's journey into your own mind. That's why I call my podcast the Neuro's Journey. Take some of what you learned on this path and go out on yours. Become the man you already know you are. The one you see when you think of yourself at your best. The one you want to show up for your kids, your partner, or the people you lead. And when you notice yourself not showing up that way, it's not a failure, that's a signal. Your system adapted in ways that are pulling you off center. And what you're going to do is adapt it back. Thanks for being here with me. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment and follow along. I'll see you next Wednesday.